Hi there, and welcome along to the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the totally free and independent Rangers podcast made by fans for fans, where all of our content is absolutely free. And as we all know by now, it's not just a podcast that we have here at Gersnet, but if you head over to our website at www.gersnet.co.uk, you can get involved in a huge host of great information and material there, including the very friendly discussion forum, plenty of articles, match previews, reviews, social media, all of that kind of thing. So please do head over to the website. If you're joining us live on the podcast tonight, it's just gone 9:30 p.m. on Sunday, the 19th of December. Thank you so much for giving up your Sunday evening to join us. Remember that the podcast is always going out live on a Sunday evening at 9:30 p.m. on the Gersnet YouTube stream, but will also be available for downloads the following Monday, and that's wherever you get your podcasts from, including Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, and also on Spotify. Frankie's not with us tonight producing the show, so it's just myself trying to set up the stream, so we've not got any fancy graphics. We've not had a theme tune or a little countdown or anything like that. Apologies if you've missed out on that, but we have got all the great content, and I promise that the show will be back to normal for anyone who's downloaded it after the fact. We will be back to normal as soon as possible. Frankie had his booster jag today, and I believe he's not feeling top of the world, so our thoughts are with him. But we have got two excellent guests to kind of tide us over. Firstly, Gary. I can't help but notice that is a fantastic Christmas jumper. Where did you get that from?
I got this from Sports Direct when we were doing the kit boycott, and I don't care.
There you go. At least you can be honest.
It cost me £10. It's the best £10 I've ever spent, I think.
There you go. How much of that actually went to Rangers, do you think?
Oh, probably a penny.
There you go.
A giant mug with it as well.
I didn't actually, no.
Oh.
I have got a giant Sports Direct mug, but it wasn't for somebody gave me it.
I think, every Rangers fan can pretend that we're uber staunch and we've never, ever shopped at Sports Direct, but I reckon 70-80% of us have one of those giant mugs kicking about in our kitchen somewhere.
Oh.
Also joining us tonight, Iain Duff. Iain, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, yeah.
Excellent. How's your week been? Have you been, you're like me, English NHS, have you had your COVID booster yet?
Yeah, I've had mine. I'm triple jabbed. A couple of weeks ago, in fact, it was. So, yeah, I'm fighting fit.
Excellent. You didn't sort of cry off sick like Frankie?
No. Made the sterner stuff than that.
Too right. Excellent. Well, we're going to need all of that stern stuff to try and get through a discussion on yesterday's game against Dundee United. It was a good result, 3 points, but a very difficult game for the players and to be fair, quite a difficult game for us as supporters as well to sit through that. Very foggy, very misty, didn't look particularly pleasant at Ibrox. Gary, I think the first thing to address is that the team sheet, the starting 11, had a fair few surprises, not least to say that Joe Aribo, who'd started every league game so far this season, was nowhere to be seen. And Nathan Patterson, who many supporters have been crying out to get a starting spot, was playing, but alongside James Tavernier, and there were a lot of questions as to how that would work in the back four. What did you make of that starting 11 yesterday?
When I seen the team to begin with, my first thing was I thought that Patterson would have just played left back and would have just continued with the team that's been playing okay, or the back four that's been playing okay. But said it was a bit weird that he seemed to play right back and Bassey was left back and James Tavernier was playing centre half. But for whatever reason, it didn't last very long, and then they changed it back. But my only thinking is that he maybe wanted a left-footed player on the left for a bit of balance for getting crosses in, but. When Patterson ended up going to left back, I think he done all right for being right-footed. Other than that, I kind of expected Aribo not to play. When I seen the attention being drawn to him getting a booking and missing out in the Celtic game, I thought it was quite sensible. But then I'm not sure that Lundstrom was the guy to replace him. You thought maybe Bakuna would have had a chance or something like that, but. Other than that, the team, as I said, I wouldn't have played Lundstrom, but I certainly thought that Aribo wouldn't have played, and I thought the back four was what I expected it to be as well, with Barisic been out.
Yeah, I guess the changes at the back have very much been forced with Barisic, Hollander, Balogun all unavailable, Nico Kapic out on loan as well. Iain, a scholar of the game as you are, have you ever seen a change to the shape and the formation and the structure of a defensive line as early as 3 minutes before? What happened there?
Well, to be honest, I don't know, because I missed the first 5 minutes of the game, so I came in at it and I just thought it was exactly what Gary had said. That was the lineup. I saw the lineup and I saw where players were playing. I actually didn't know until this morning that they'd actually started out in a different formation. So obviously it wasn't working. I mean, they obviously could see, which you have to say, while you might think, well, it was the wrong decision to start with, if he's identified that it was going to be a problem that early and is confident enough to change it, then, full marks to Gio for that, because, a lot of managers would have just stuck with it and just said, right, well, that's what I've done. I'm not going to change it at this early stage. And by the time you do change it, it could be too late. So he's obviously identified that it was going to be a problem early doors and changed it. And to be honest, as I say, I didn't even know. So it seemed like the logical thing to do. I mean, what I would say is that it does sort of concern me a wee bit for the future of Jack Simpson in that squad, because if he's now behind James Tavernier as a centre back in the pecking order, then where does that leave him? That you would have thought would have been the game that he would have been brought in to play in. So I was quite actually surprised when I realised what the original formation had been, that he hadn't been given a go himself. But that said, I don't know what prompted it. I think there was a case where the ball came over and Tavernier went over his head or something like that. I read this morning, and that was obviously enough for Gio to think, well, this isn't going to work. Let's change it straight away. But
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there was a very, very early on episode where the ball did kind of come over Taft's shoulder, and he just seemed to be kind of almost overthinking, what am I supposed to do playing in this position? It wasn't coming natural to him. And
has he ever played there before? I mean, I can't remember any games, certainly for Rangers, that he's played in that position.
No, certainly not as a centre half in a back four. One or two.
Yeah, you can maybe see it as a back three. Yeah.
You have to imagine that there were conversations had beforehand saying, right, we will start and we will try this, but be prepared to revert to a Patterson left back, Tav right back. And I take what you're saying about Jack Simpson. It must be difficult for him, because it's not just Tav who's a fullback who's ahead of him as a centre half. It's Bassey as well. Okay, Bassey's done very, very well, but he's still a fullback. I suspect that Jack Simpson is going to be going the way of the George Edmondsons and the Jordan Jones and the Jake Hasties, and probably be finding himself a loan move in January with a view to leaving in the summer. Gary, sorry, Karen.
I was just going to say, I mean, he's obviously came in fairly far down, the line anyway, but you would have thought, in the circumstances with 3 or 4 central defenders out, that he would have been trusted enough to come into that position, but obviously not.
Well, certainly in a home game against a team that's been struggling for form and a team that was fairly decimated by COVID, some of their more dangerous players, Ian Harkes, John Doe Fuchs, missing. And he still can't get a game. So I think Leon King was on the bench as well, and you have to be wondering, would Leon King be getting a game ahead of Jack Simpson at this point?
I'm quite surprised that he's not actually featured before properly anyway, to be honest. I mean, I would have thought, from everything I've read, he's a decent player. I would have thought he'd have got a chance at some point, but
yeah, and
let's hope he does.
He was making the bench at the tail end of last season, be it different circumstances, the league was wrapped up, but yeah, I agree, I'm sure he will in the very near future. Gary, turning our attention then to the remainder of the first half, the following 42 minutes, it was fairly slow, fairly turgid, a lot of possession, but not a lot being created, and we never really looked like causing too much damage. As I was writing my notes for today's show and trying to think back to all of the talking points of that first 45, it was very, very limited. So we're going to skip ahead actually to halftime when changes were made. So Scott Wright was brought on. And the shape seemed to change. What happened there? What impact did that change have?
I think it was just somebody that was willing to actually run at them. As much as I like Yanis Hadji as a player, I don't think he had the best of games yesterday. And even at half time, I was watching on Rangers TV. They'd said that he was actually coming off at half time, which I wasn't surprised about. And when it went back to the actual game, you could see it was Lundstrom that they'd taken off. But for especially Hadji, a great player and makes chances, but I think he's wasted on the right wing. Whereas when we brought Scott Wright on, I think he'll total benefit for the new system that Van Bronckhorst's playing rather than this inverted winger. He's an out-and-out winger, got pace, willing to run at them. And like there's 2 or 3 times he really had that boy on toast. But I can't even remember. I think the guy got a booking pretty straight away when he came on. As I say, I think the main problem with us yesterday was Dundee United, because as you said, they were decimated. They were playing for a draw, in my opinion, and they were making it just really, really difficult for us. And we didn't really have any creativity in the middle with Hadji being off the boil a wee bit. So like guys like Lundstrom and that, all they'll do is pass it sideways. So at least there was a bit of a spark that came on when Wright came on.
There's a good comment here actually in the chat from CGM55 talking about Lundstrom, Gary. I thought Lundstrom was relatively poor. I don't think he did much in the game yesterday. But this comment here suggesting that actually it was the fact that Kamara was pushed a little bit further forward and Kamara wasn't really performing in that role. It kind of reflected badly on Lundstrom. I mean, Kamara, he's not one of those players that we associate with being pushed so far forward. What impact do you think that had on Rangers and on the shape?
I think it's not even a case of pair. I understand like Kamara playing a bit further forward, but I don't see him as a creative player. And I think he's pretty identical to Lundstrom in the fact that they keep it simple, that there's no really any flashes, probably don't lose the ball much, but they don't play it like the killer passes and then take the gambles that maybe like a Hadji would or even an Aribo. That's what I just think it's maybe a bit too samey in the middle of the park for their style of play. And kind of when you're trying to chase the game, having 2 kind of deeper line midfielders, I think it was maybe what we didn't need, especially when Dundee United weren't really trying to win the game. As I said, I think they were happy setting up with a 3 or a 5 at the back and just kind of catching us on the break.
I think that's part of the strangeness of the lineup for me yesterday, though, is the fact that he wanted to bring Lundstrom in, but he chose to put Kamara further forward. I agree, those are 2 very, very similar players, but when you've got a Scott Wright who can play further forward, a Fashion Sakala, even a Juninho Bacuna, and I must admit, I thought that Bacuna, who started his career in the Netherlands, played for the Netherlands under 21, 82, I'm looking at his stats here, 82 appearances for Groningen in the Eredivisie. Gio must know this guy. So I was surprised that he's not getting much more of a look in than he did under Stevie G, and that he would choose to put Kamara in that position. I think, look, fair play, you have to, one of the criticisms of Gerrard's reign was that he didn't make his changes quick enough. Well, yesterday Gio changed the defensive shape after 3 minutes and then changed the attacking shape at half time, and that absolutely made the difference. But I do sort of stand by the fact that I found it a very, very odd way to set up the starting 11 yesterday. Iain, to come back to Scott Wright, I mean, he's been a bit part player, certainly under Gerrard, and that's continued under Gio. Now, when he first came in, he seemed to make very rapid improvements and did improve the team whenever he got on the park. But he's not really kicked on for me. He's not established himself as a real superstar of this team. What do you think his future at Rangers looks like? Because it feels like it could be in quite a pivotal place at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be a starter, to be honest. I think he's, at best, going to be someone who comes on and maybe affects a game in the second half or later on in the game. I just don't think he's, for me anyway, I just don't see him as ever being good enough to merit a starting place in a full strength starting 11. As part of the squad and as part of the as an option to bring on, then as it showed yesterday, that he did have an impact and did improve the team as they were set up, and that's maybe where his future lies. Whether he's happy enough with that or not is another question, and whether as time progresses, who knows what the plans are for bringing new players in, etc. Then maybe he'll find himself further down the pecking order again. I don't know, but I think at the moment, I don't see him breaking into the first team as a starter anytime soon. But that's not to say he's not going to play his part. He's obviously a skillful, talented player. Just maybe not good enough to be in ahead of some of the guys that have got the possession of the places at the moment.
Yeah, and when we start the game with Yanis Hadji on the right wing, again, it must be frustrating for guys like Scott Wright, who would see themselves as more of a natural right winger. There's actually another comment in the chat here saying that the first signing we make in January should be a right-sided winger. So I must say I agree. I think that's a real gap for us at the moment. Iain, staying with yourself, and as someone who's obviously very sort of rational and level-headed when it comes to these things, it's another penalty for Rangers yesterday. Breakthrough comes from the penalty spot, the only goal of the game. And there's been murmurings of controversy. Another penalty for Rangers. Whenever Rangers are in a tight spot, they always get dug out by refs, giving them penalties and red cards. Do you kind of come to a point of now expecting controversy, expecting these comments whenever Rangers get penalties, and how do you kind of assess all of the noise that comes with it?
Of course, I mean, I've said it before. I mean, I've been hearing this. I'm older than both of you guys, and I've been around for a while, and I've heard all this stuff for the last 20, 30 years, more than that probably. And it's amplified now because of social media, so you're reading more about it and you see more about it, and that seems to get picked up in the sort of mainstream press as well. But I mean, and that was such a stonewall penalty yesterday. It's hard to believe that people would even raise that as an issue. The fact that it was a 1-0 win for Rangers down to that penalty is probably just sort of sent some of them into a frenzy as usual. But what can you do? I mean, I suppose the underlying thing about it is that it puts pressure. The whole narrative that all Rangers get penalties puts pressure on referees, or that's the intention anyway, is to put pressure on referees. Now, I don't know whether it does put pressure on them or not, whether they do make decisions when they're in the heat of the game based on what they might think somebody might say on social media or in a column in a newspaper or something. I don't know. I would like to think not, but who knows? What goes through a referee's mind in that split second before he blows his whistle or doesn't. But it is just noise. It's just one of these things that will never go away. To be quite honest, if Rangers win every game for the rest of this season 1-0 with a dubious penalty in the last minute, I'll be delighted. And I don't really care what anybody says about it. To be honest, I'm way beyond caring about that sort of thing now.
Yeah, I think that's probably the healthiest place to be, unlike the likes of Mr. Hartson, who are getting themselves into a bit of a frenzy anytime Rangers get a penalty.
It's absolutely outrageous. I mean, I don't like to sort of bring up what goes on in Celtic games, but I mean, by all accounts today, Hibs had a pretty clear penalty that was denied to them in the last minute of the game, and that will probably not be discussed by anyone really in any great detail, whereas people will still be going on about the Rangers penalty a week from now or 2 weeks from now, and bringing it up again, and how this is evidence that Rangers have got the referees in their pocket. I mean, it's tiring listening to all that stuff again. But the best thing to do really is just to try and block it out. Really, is my view on it.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know how many penalties we've had. I don't know how many penalties other teams in this league have had this season. But what I will say is, you go back through, let's say we've had 4 or 5 penalties this season. Firstly, it's not a surprise that an attacking team, a team that has a lot of possession, that creates a lot of chances, it's not a surprise that they gain more penalties. I remember that season that we were, the first season under Warburton, I think it was in the Championship. Our whole game was about getting the ball down, getting it in the box and running at defenders who are less skillful. And you draw a foul that way. Martin Waghorn made a career at Rangers out of scoring penalties for a little while. So we're going to pick up penalties, absolutely. But to anyone who wants to question this as some kind of controversy or some kind of conspiracy, go back through our penalties this season and tell me which one we didn't deserve. Which one was controversial? They're all penalties. They're all legitimate. So if we are getting the decisions that we should be getting, that's not a controversy. That's not a scandal. That's not a conspiracy.
Well, what they're essentially saying is that they don't care whether it should have or shouldn't have been a penalty. They just don't want Rangers to get it. And what they want is the referees to be to cheat, basically, and not give the penalty because that suits what they want. Well, that you can't argue with that kind of mental logic. So brush them off, basically.
We will do. Let's brush them off right now. Gary, we've mentioned Iain Hadji once or twice on the show this evening, and I think we all accept he's a player of significant talent with an excellent career ahead of him. But he was poor yesterday, in my opinion. He got sponsors man of the match somehow. I mean,
bizarre.
That was really strange. But I thought he was poor. I think to a degree he's kind of come out and acknowledged that he was poor. He apologised for an attempted Rabona that didn't go so well, and admitted that wasn't Rangers standards, and fair play to him for doing so. But he's actually, for me, not had a great season. His numbers in terms of goals and assists, still not great. What do you make of his performances so far this season, and what he needs to do? Is it that he's been played out of position? Is it a confidence thing? How do you see the rest of the season going for him?
Well, actually, I think it could be all of those things that you said. I think Hadji's a player that needs to kind of get a team built around him to get the best out of him. I think putting him on the wings, no use. If you want him to be a winger, like when he played with under Gerrard's system, it was more inside. So that was more his talents. But you can't deny that he's an absolute cracking player, and he's a match-winning player. And I think that's why Van Bronckhorst has been playing him, and that's why I wouldn't take him off, because he is a guy that will do that. He'll do nothing for 90 minutes, then one pass or one ball, and we've scored, or wins a free kick that potentially leads to a goal as well. But see, any time I hear Iain Hadji talk, I always say he seems to understand what it's to be to play at a club like Rangers, and for me that's one of the good things that he understands, and I think it's a great player. I can't get my head around people that are criticising him. I seen on social media earlier that it was kind of the whipping boy for yesterday, and that sometimes people have bad games. It was a bad game yesterday, and he's not going to be a world-class player every game. If he was, he wouldn't be playing with Rangers.
Yeah, I mean he's raw, isn't he? But I mean I'm looking at his numbers here, and he's got 3 goals and 3 assists this season. So 6 goal contributions. He's played 21 games. It's 13% goal conversion, a goal every 480 minutes. He's meant to be a creative player. I mean, are those numbers enough for someone in that role? Given that I presume he'd be one of our top earners in the squad as well. I don't know, that to me that doesn't seem to be enough in terms of contribution on the numbers, but maybe he brings a little bit more elsewhere.
So I didn't actually realise his numbers were that low until you said that. That's actually quite surprising. But certainly, if that is his numbers, he needs to buck up his ideas a wee bit, because because of the kind of player he is, he needs to have the impact. When we were playing last season, there was games he wouldn't do nothing, then he'd score a goal or create a goal and would win the game 1-0. But he needs to be doing that definitely more regularly. But again, it's maybe just the system doesn't suit him.
Yeah, I think you're right about him playing on the wing. I mean, I don't see him as a winger at all. I don't think his style of play really sort of lends itself to that.
He's too slow to be a winger.
Yeah, exactly. He's too slow, and he gets a bit isolated out there, and he gets a bit, he's skillful, obviously, but that's not really enough for a winger in the modern game. I mean, maybe yesterday would have been an ideal opportunity for Wright to come in and play on the right wing, and Hadji to maybe play in the role that Kamara was playing in, perhaps. I don't know, that sort of further forward in midfield, so he's sort of the sort of traditional number 10 or whatever, and maybe in Sakala maybe or someone else in the forward line. So I think maybe it'd be more effective through the centre rather than sort of stuck out out wide. Yeah, but that's all. I think still at this stage, I think Van Bronckhorst is still assessing the squad, assessing the players, looking at how he can make. I think that was maybe the idea yesterday, was that he's just going to try something different, try different things, and see what other options are available to him, instead of just sticking with the sort of tried and tested that we've had before. So maybe that will be at some point he'll change it around a bit.
I actually thought that Hadji's best form came towards the end of last season when he played in the middle of the park. I can't even mind who it was injured. I think somebody was injured, and maybe Davis or that towards the end of the season, and he played maybe 5 games in centre mid. I thought it was brilliant. It was middle of the park, could influence everything, pulling all the strings. and then when we're starting again this season, he's been put to this kind of the right side of the midfield, and it just doesn't seem to work for him.
I mean, it might be that we do have a surplus of players in the centre of midfield, and we didn't have anyone maybe available to play on the right. So maybe that's just purely down to that he's available, so he gets put out there, and that's to his, it's not really it's to his detriment to sort of do that. But with the other player, who would you drop amongst the central midfielders? Maybe
especially the way that Aribo's playing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
He's undroppable. I think when when Hadji was signed, the way we played was you had a Kent kind of right-footed on the left, cutting inside, and then Hadji was, you would think, basically do the same job on the right-hand side. But now that our formation's changed to the wingers basically hitting the byline, and we're not relying on the fullbacks as much, that system's just not going to work for them.
Yeah, that is. I think you're right as well. By the way, that's the most notable change for me is those fullbacks, and that means that we have more reliance on the wingers, and that brings us back to recruitment in January. I think, and that right wing position is going to be key. We'll see. Interesting times ahead. Someone who's not undroppable though, Iain, is Steve Davis. Stephen Davis, who was previously undroppable, brought back in a couple of years ago and has been excellent. A really sort of devoted servant to Rangers over the years, but doesn't seem to be getting so much of a look in since Gio came in. Lundstrom and Kamara both played yesterday. I think Davis's numbers have definitely dropped away in terms of game time since the change of manager. How do you assess that situation? A guy who still physically seems to be able to give us 90 minutes week in, week out. Had you noticed a dip in his form this season, or how do you assess what's going on there?
Yeah, I think he was playing too much at the start of the season, to be honest. I think he was playing basically every game, and those games where I thought he would be rested or somebody else would be given a chance, and he was starting. And I think he was starting to drop off a little bit in terms of form just prior to Gerrard leaving. That said, I mean, I don't know whether, I don't know what the thinking is behind leaving them out completely at the moment, but I think, to be honest, when push comes to shove, he'll be the guy that he'll be called upon. I think I would imagine he'll play against Celtic. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays against Aberdeen as well. I think perhaps he's been wrapped up in cotton wool for the important games where he can be sort of brought in at that stage, because his influence on the team when he's playing well is immeasurable, because he really he controls the ball in the middle of the park quite often, and in games like that where it's a bit frantic, he's massively important. So I don't think it's anything. Personally, I don't know obviously what's going on behind the scenes, but I don't think Van Bronckhorst doesn't like him or anything like that. I just think he's probably thinking, you played a lot of games for Rangers and for Northern Ireland, and it's maybe time you just have a break and sort of and recharge the batteries, and then come back in when we need you.
I mean, we've already spoken about Kamara and Lundstrom being very similar types of players. Is Davis another one of those, and three players in that one position just doesn't go?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke before, I think, about specifically Davis and Lundstrom playing in the same team, and that didn't work. And I think it's exactly the same situation yesterday. I don't think Lundstrom and Kamara in the same starting or in the same sort of position works either. So I think with the three of them who are offer a similar kind of thing, you might not for games like yesterday, you wouldn't really think you would need, certainly wouldn't need all three of them. You wouldn't even think you would need two of them playing at the same time.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gary. How about yourself? I mean, Steve Davis, for Rangers fans of a certain generation, I'll count you and I in the same generation, he's kind of been a stalwart and one of those players that we really matured alongside. So I find it quite difficult to see him not even make it the bench yesterday. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think it's just the amount of games we've got coming up, and it's what 30, 37, 38, is he? Maybe a bit younger than that.
Yeah, so,
but I agree with you. I think he'll probably play in the bigger games. We know what he can do, but definitely, I think it's just our system now. Because I think since Van Bronckhorst came in, he started like the kind of two holding midfielders. I think he maybe realised you didn't need that, especially if we're playing at Ibrox. So he's been kind of playing Kamara as that one holding midfielder. I just think we've not got enough room in that team for two or even three holding midfield players, as you are saying. I think Steve Davis is just, if we're being honest with ourselves, we've probably played a lot more than what we thought when he came back a few years ago. There was a point there was no other option but to play him just because he was the best for that position. But if you're looking after him and with all this sports science and that they do now, he probably was playing too many games.
Yeah, well, I think he probably was. I think when he first came back in under Gerrard a couple of seasons ago, he was not intended to play every game. I guess the elephant in the room is we've got three players trying to go for that one pivot midfielder role. What the hell's going to happen when Ryan Jack's fit? We can delay that question for a couple of months at least until Ryan Jack is fully back fighting fit. Gents, we will put yesterday's performance behind us. Obviously, it was a 1-0 victory, another 3 points on the board. Celtic won't play in the league, they're playing in the Cup today, which means that we move 7 points clear, albeit Celtic have a game in hand, which I think they pick up midweek away at St Mirren. We are now not playing until Boxing Day, then Aberdeen, then the Old Firm on the 2nd before we go into the winter break. So a strong position to kind of wrap up at the end of the year if we can keep the momentum going. And I think it's one of those games that, given that Dundee United is the first team to beat us in the best part of 18 months, 2 years, just a thankful one to come away from that game with 3 points. But we'll move on and start to examine the COVID situation. Unfortunately, something that's very much rearing its head down here in England. Plenty of games getting postponed. I think there was just the one game yesterday in the Premier League that survived, and a couple today. Iain, we've obviously seen the impact that COVID has had on Scottish football in the past, not least with the lack of supporters in stadiums last season, but the way that the season before was prematurely wrapped up. How do you assess the situation that we have now? Games don't seem to be getting postponed too frequently. It's very ad hoc whenever that happens. But given what's happening in England, what do you think of the position that we're in at the moment?
Well, I think it's probably inevitable that games are going to get postponed. I think, the way the figures are going for infection rates and things like that, it's almost inevitable that players are going to test positive, and that is obviously going to result in games getting called off. We'll see how things pan out. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's restrictions in terms of stadiums being reduced capacity or even closed altogether in the next sort of couple of weeks. I think the way things are panning out, it's looking like there's going to be further restrictions across all parts of the country in the next few weeks. So I think football will not escape that. In terms of the actual games, I think there's a case to be made for maybe having a break or a week or so, or 2 weeks, maybe just as a sort of to try and to clear through the worst of it. But who knows how long that would last. So I think they'll try and just keep it going as much as they can. But, we don't really know. I mean, that's the thing. We don't know how this is going to pan out. We don't know whether the infection rates are going to drop soon or whether they're going to carry on. I don't know how vaccination rates are in terms of Scottish football. I know in England it seems to be ridiculous that especially in the EFL, the numbers are relatively low for second vaccinations and even lower for third. I don't know what it's like in Scotland, but I think that it's going to be affected, but we just don't know how it's going to pan out in terms of numbers. So my fear is that that it could get worse and that they'll be inevitably having to stop games altogether. But well, fingers crossed. Yeah.
Gary, how about yourself? What's your view on this situation?
I think they should just do the right thing and call the league and give us a trophy now.
They've got priors.
No, that's precedent's been set. So but seriously, I think the winter breaks will be coming at a good time. I just hope we can get to that stage. I think zero crowds are going to be probably this week. I could see them coming out with some kind of announcement about crowds, which might actually help us for the game at Parkhead. But it's just this. All the cases are going up, and the way that the isolation rules are up in Scotland as well. And if it's in a household, even if you're negative, you've still to isolate. if somebody else in the household is positive, regardless of your vaccination status. So I think it's going to be hard for people to not be affected, whether they've got school kids or obviously a footballer's partner and thing is they've got to lock themselves in the house. So so it's not looking good, but fingers crossed can ride it out.
Yeah,
that's kind of what surprises me, that it's in England. It seems to have been worse in England so far, because the rules are a bit more relaxed down here in terms of contacts, etc. And so that it just surprises me, because everything else would suggest that the rates are sort of similar in Scotland and England. So I'm not really sure how Scottish football has managed to, relatively speaking, sort of escape it this so far. But we'll say that now. But who knows what's around the corner? But
I think even just from a COVID point of view as well, I think Rangers were pretty, I'm going to say, lucky last year that we didn't actually have any major cases. It could have been because we were rigging the test with that Northern Irish company that everybody was kind of talking about. But I think that luckily we were okay last year. I just hope this year we didn't get any big hits, because if you were to lose 4 or 5 players for whatever reason, it could really throw the season into a bit of disaster. So.
Yeah, I guess, Gary, the question is, what does the club do? In terms of keeping their players safe, the club can't force people to get vaccinated, but is there anything that we can do to make sure that we're as protected and as safe as possible?
I'd certainly just be telling them, I'll just watch what you're doing, especially at the moment, and tell them why. Because it's clear to see that doing something stupid, whether it maybe be going to a concert or something like that, or can go to a Christmas market or something like that, maybe not the best idea at the moment.
I think players need to sort of take a look at themselves and think, well, we're in a privileged position here. We get paid a lot of money. We get privileges. We sacrifice a lot already in our lives. We don't do things. We don't, most players anyway, don't go to the pub every Saturday night after the games these days. They sacrifice a lot to prolong that career and to keep that career going. This is just another example of something where they have to do that. And whether or not they agree with being vaccinated or not, well, I guess that's down to them. But and you say you can't force them to do it. But all the other things that they should be doing, like Gary says, I mean, they should be taking that into consideration. And you can't control what everyone else in your family does. So, these things will just happen. But you just have to do as much as you can yourself and try and mitigate any risks.
Yeah, that's it. Look, everyone has an opinion. From we need to wrap everyone in bubble wrap and isolate through to it's just a cold and let's get on with it. There's no right, there's no wrong. I certainly don't want to bore everyone with COVID chat. It's going to have an impact on the season. We won the first Old Firm game of the season, missing 5 key players and a manager. So we don't need to be afraid of the situation.
No, absolutely.
We have the best squad in Scotland. From the looks of it, we have, again, the best coaching team in Scotland. So the season, barring some heinous awarding of a title via email and handing over a trophy in a car park, again, the season will sort itself out and the best team should win the league, refereeing and an SFA aside. So I think that's probably the best place to leave it. A slightly shorter show this evening, but given how turgid yesterday's game was, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. What I'll say is a massive thank you to both Iain and to Gary for giving up their Sunday evenings to join me this evening, and a big thanks to everyone who's joined us on the YouTube stream as well. Lots of really great comments and chats going on there. I apologise for the lack of fancy graphics and theme tunes, but like I say, with Frankie being under the weather, he's the man with the keys and knows how to do all those things. I'm afraid I certainly do not. But thanks again for everyone who's given up their Sunday to come and join us. Like I say, the podcast is always available for download first thing on a Monday morning. Please do like and subscribe to make sure you never miss a thing. In the meantime, head over to the website at www.gersnet.co.uk. Get involved in the friendly discussion forum where you can find myself, Gary, Iain, and all the other Gersnet podcast contributors as well. Let us know your thoughts. The show will be back, of course, next Sunday, which is Boxing Day. We might push that one to the Monday, just checking in on how wives, partners, and all sorts feel about us giving up our Sunday evenings on Boxing Day. But keep your eye on Frankie's social media page and we'll let you know the latest info on that. Until next time, please do stay safe. Have a wonderful, very, very Merry Christmas if we don't see you before then. And until next time, goodbye for now.